I'm sitting right where I was when I left off last time. I love being in a room full of books. In fact, I use a Surface Pro, and it's setting up on a short stack of theological reference books to get it up high enough so that you're not looking up my nose. Man, I love this library. I love our directors, Jim and Laurie Barnes. And I love the ministry they have in Prague, the Czech Republic, and in a city where 90% of the people are either agnostic or atheist. 10% of these people have included faith in God in one form or another into their life, but the other 90%, no. Wow. The challenges are endless, but boy, so are the opportunities. So, okay. Back into 1 Timothy chapter 3, verse 4. He must manage his own family well, and I talked a lot about that, but believe it or not, there's way more that I could have said, and I have held myself back. He must manage his own family well and see that his children obey him. A well-managed family is a family. One of the ways you can observe or tell that a family is well managed is that the children are fundamentally, basically obedient to their parents. So does that mean that I do not believe that means that your children, they cower in your presence and they have to ask you permission for every little thing. But you've been around families like this where the kids run the house, right? They rule the roost. And from time they were preschoolers, they figured out that if they threw the tantrum at the right time in the most intense way, they were going to get what they wanted pretty much every time. So I think what Paul and the Holy Spirit are saying is that can't be the pattern for the well-managed family of the overseer, of the elder, this mature elder sibling in God's family. Children who obey their parents, kids have different personalities and temperaments and natures. Some kids are really compliant. They just do what they're told. There are others, though, not so much. Some people think, oh, you must have been such a rebel when you were a kid. No, I wasn't very much of a rebel. I was fairly compliant. And I was pretty much a rule keeper, but I did like creative latitude. And sometimes not morally, I can honestly say, I didn't do this when it came to morality, but there were other times when I would kind of reinterpret various laws, not civil law. I'm just talking about like at school or other settings. Okay. Thing is, if it could be made into fun and if it made sense to me, I was in. Otherwise, you're going to have to, okay. But there are those kids who they are by nature either not compliant or at least less compliant. What do you do with them? What if you've got a kid who just doesn't want to obey? And there are those kids. I believe some of that could be because of their temperament. I actually believe that there are kids they have some nutritional or hormonal deficiency that's creating a dissonance within their neurology, and sometimes they are oppositional for that reason. These are very, 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 very few against the whole. Most of the kids that I have worked with, observed, worked with their families who are oppositional, and by that I mean they do not obey, they will not obey, are that way generally, and I don't want to be judgmental, but here's my observation. They are that way because they learned they could be that way. I learned that if I didn't obey, there were consequences for that I did not want. I grew up with a dad, had no problem with spanking. As a matter of fact, he didn't spank. He whooped us. My parents did. There's a very famous verse in the book of Proverbs that says, if you spare the rod, you will spoil the child. Meaning, the rod of punishment, when used well and appropriately, will help shape a child's will toward what is good for them and for the world around them. Today, I've discovered that I can't strongly advocate spanking, partly because there have been lots and lots of people who were not appropriately punished. They were punished inappropriately. They were beaten. They were physically abused by immature, sometimes selfish, even sometimes evil parents. Sometimes only parents who didn't know any better. But and I think I get that. So I'm not saying get the paddle out, start whipping rear ends and burning bottoms. But I am saying that when a young child, disobeys, that's the time to begin working to reshape their will so that they will desire to obey you, because when they disobey, the consequences are not pleasant or happy for them. There's a difference between punishment and discipline. And this is an essential difference that it's essential for a parent to understand. Punishment. What's the role of punishment? Punishment is only for the sake of getting the attention of the child. Different kids, I'm thinking about my 3 daughters now. I could get the attention of my 3 daughters in different ways. They weren't all the same. But until I got their attention, in order to get their attention, I had to do some form of punishment. Often, it's always got to involve discomfort. You get to decide what's an appropriate amount of and the appropriate means of providing that discomfort. But you are responsible. I can't say it in a happy sort of way, but you are responsible as the parent to provide the discomfort to get the child's attention. A lot of parents, the only thing they know to do on this is time out, which can be done effectively. But you know this, but I'm going to say it anyway. Time out is not going to work after a certain age. Kids are different, but especially in our world, you give a kid a timeout and send them to their room. Well, they've got, like, NASA would have died to have the technology when they sent John Glenn into space that your kids got in their room. And that's not time out. That's just time in their room. Time out needs to be no data, no media, no toys, no play. This means you got a time where this is isolation. I'm not advocating solitary confinement for the rest of their life. But I am saying if it doesn't provide discomfort for your kid, you will not get their attention. Okay? This was one of the benefits of spanking. It provided instant discomfort. but the person administrating that had to know when they had gotten their kids' attention. And although I am not advocating spanking, but I will tell you, when the world was different and I could teach about this, I would say, when you know you've got your kids' attention, not one swat more. That's it. Because the whole purpose of that punishment and the pain associated with it was to get the kids' attention. And when that happened, punishment's over. Then what has to follow that is discipline. What is discipline? I'll say it again. Discipline is not punishment. Discipline, it's training. Okay, so I'm going to use a young kid as an example because it's a little easier. A child does something that breaks a rule, and you punish them with whatever punishment until you know you got their attention. And then you teach them one of the most important questions to ask in terms of discipline is to say, now, why did I punish you? Seems like a silly question. It's not silly at all. The kid needs to be able to tell you why they think you punished them. Because if they're not, how do I say this? Sometimes they thought it was for something else. Okay, you need to be able to get specific with them. This is why you got punished. Okay, and if when they tell you, that's the best way. And then the second question is, how do you think? What could you do so that you wouldn't get punished for that? You see where I'm going with that is, I want to teach my child that they don't have to get punished. And the way to not get punished is ding, 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 obey. Well, I'll be dadgum. Yeah, it's not easy. And honestly, it initially probably will take you more time. But the payoff is so good. And this oppositional child, don't, if you got one who is strong-willed and oppositional, you have a very difficult, challenging job. And I would never disrespect or disregard you for how difficult this is. I will recommend a really old book that I think has terrific wisdom and advice by James Dobson. The title is The Strong-Willed Child. And in that book, he gives great advice, wonderful wisdom from a godly perspective on how do you deal with a kid who's got this strong will without breaking their spirit. Because the objective of effective discipline, which follows effective punishment, is to shape the child's will, not break their spirit. This is impossible for me in 15 minutes to unpack in depth, but I'm going to throw the challenge out to anybody who's still got kids at home that discipline is equally as important as punishment, but you'll never really be able to do effective discipline until you get the child's attention, whatever their age is. The older they get, the more creative you're going to have to be with what punishment will get their attention. And often the punishment we found that got the kids' attention was withholding privilege. And you can think about that for yourselves and decide what's going to get your kids' attention. If a mom and dad, husband and wife, they've got to have a little bit of a conference to talk through and figure out what might work. And then you creatively and experimentally and in partnership with God, you pursue finding ways, reasonable and effective ways, to get your kids' attention so that you can do the discipline. In the book of Hebrews, it says, no discipline seems pleasant at the time, but painful. Later on, however, it produces a harvest of righteousness and peace. It's true. I'll see you next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.